Hello, 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 and welcome to another live stream happy hour with Lena Arts Council. I'm your host, Eric Brayman, and I'm going to be welcoming on Nicole Hummel on the screen in just a little bit, but I figured I'd start off with getting all of our first introductions out of the way before we pull her up onto the screen. So if this is your first time tuning into the live stream happy hour, we started this about a year ago, actually exactly almost a year ago today in response to the breakout of the pandemic and venues being shut down all across Lane County. We started this as a way for our communities to still be able to connect with one another, learn about some of the amazing artists doing cool work in our community, and connect them to you, our audiences out there in Lane County. Throughout the course of today's show, if you are interested, you can drop little comments and we might be able to pull those into the conversation. If you have questions, please drop them there in the comment section and we'll pull those on. We are live both on Facebook and YouTube today, so plenty of opportunities to be able to get people to tune in. So even if somebody doesn't have a YouTube, send them or to Facebook, send them over to our Lane Arts Council YouTube and they can check out and catch the show there tonight. Also, this is an opportunity for us to be able to remind you of the value of investing in the arts in this very important and difficult time, and especially after this past year. You can invest in the arts by supporting artists, by purchasing their art, by donating to arts organizations in the community, and by investing in digital arts experiences. So encourage you today to please go out and find an artist. Perhaps Nicole might be one of those artists you want to buy a piece of art from, and find an arts organization you feel passionate about and a civil rights organization you feel passionate about, and make a contribution, donation, or purchase an investment in one of their experiences soon. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pull Nicole Hummel up onto the screen with us to say hello. So welcome, Nicole. Thanks for being here with us.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so glad you're doing this.
Oh my gosh, we're so excited to have you. Nicole, so tell me a little bit about your artistry and how you personally identify as an artist.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a potter, first and foremost. I make functional ceramics, mostly with very textured surfaces. And I really feel a lot of inspiration about filling people's homes with functional work that they can use every day that really enriches their everyday experiences. So from the morning cup of coffee to dinner with your family, a beautiful vase for your flowers. I love to bring intention and beauty to all of those moments. So that's what I really love to do. I mostly work on the wheel. So throw my work on the wheel out of stoneware clay and then fire in a couple different kilns. I fire in a gas kiln as well as a wood fire kiln, which we'll get into later. And I make everything from mugs and bowls to plates and dinnerware sets. And pitchers, teaware, all kinds of different functional objects, also bigger things, platters and bigger vases. And then more recently, I've been exploring more abstract sculpture.
Ooh, I'm very excited to learn a little bit more about that. And you're somebody who many folks around here might recognize actually from events around town, because you have had booths at the holiday fair and you've done it at the Saturday market as well. Is that true?
Yeah. I've been a vendor at Saturday Market since I moved to Eugene about 4 years ago. So both Saturday Market and the holiday market. And I also do shows around the Pacific Northwest. Of course, not since COVID, but I would travel to Washington and all around Oregon to do pottery shows and art shows. And then I also have my work in a couple different galleries across the Northwest. So up in Seattle and on the coast. But here in town, it's mostly Saturday Market, which I haven't vended at for a while. And then also, studio sales and little pop-up things like that. Yeah. And more recently, I've been focusing, this last year especially, I've been really focusing on increasing online sales. So my website is I've really revamped my website and have been doing a lot of work to have that more accurately reflect what I make and the extent of what I make.
Amazing. And while you're listening today, viewers, if you feel so inspired, the link is to Nicole's website is right there, scrolling across the bottom of the screen right now. It's also in the pinned section of the comments here for the video. So go click over there, scan through all of her amazingly beautiful options of beautiful pieces of art for you to be able to consider and add a little piece of functional beauty to your household. Let's talk about shift that you've been experiencing in your art? You talked a little bit about the kind of shift towards a little bit more abstract expression and maybe art pieces that aren't so much focused in function. Is that kind of the shift that you're going through?
Yeah. So recently, and it's been a lot of different factors in my life have kind of caused me to move into this more sculptural direction. COVID was a big impact on my business, doing mostly
Mhm.
in-person shows that were all canceled last year. And then also motherhood, a lot has shifted in terms of what I want to be making. And
Mhm.
a lot of those different forces kind of caused me to look inward and really think about what fulfills me, what excites me, what's alive for me in with clay and with
Mhm.
art. And so that's yeah, I've been kind of exploring more abstract work,
Mhm.
sculptural wall pieces,
Mm.
and various yeah, like different textures and forms that are using a completely different method, more hand building and sculpting and different kinds of clay. And it's been really, really fun to kind of set loose and explore that realm. It feels completely yeah, it feels pretty new to me and also really alive, like I said. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, that's so cool to hear about how you've kind of taken some of the new flow of life that you have. Kind of becoming a mother shifts a lot of the flow of life. Becoming a parent in general becomes a big shift. I see your pieces right there that you're stepping out of.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Then you're kind of like that new shift in life, and then this past year for everyone has been a huge shift in kind of like the flow of things, and to see kind of opportunity, it sounds like, in that, in kind of this new realm of exploration. So, what was like the moment that made you feel like, okay, I'm gonna step away from the wheel and start messing with my hands? What was a could you have like a moment that kind of felt like a moment that you started stepping in that direction?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I kept, last year, my son is 2 now, and last year I kept kind of feeling not that inspired to kind of go into my production mode, especially because there wasn't the demand there for really
Mhm.
filling the shelves at a booth.
Mhm.
Um, and I kept having these dreams and different kind of ideas, almost like a tactile experience too of like the way that I wanted to be working with clay.
Mhm.
And I was just feeling really pulled to do that. And last year, actually, I still was kind of in my groove of production and making and figuring out this online business. And then I really did a lot of reflecting over like kind of over winter and fall as well, thinking about, like, okay, if I'm going to go into this work, I feel like I need to set aside a specific amount of time, a dedicated time each week that I'm really going to be spending time doing this. And so I thought, like, okay, in December, when I was doing my holiday kind of pushes with my online work and everything, I was like, okay, this is not the time. But January and February will be a good time. And so I decided, okay, every Friday for 4 hours, I'm going to let myself go to my studio and have no expectation about what's going to come out
Mhm.
and just have the clay in front of me. And it was so liberating. And just to have that intentional time, because you can think that you want to do something, but you really got to like schedule it. And especially when it's something new, there's so many blocks to like
Mhm.
really diving fully into that. And so I spent a lot of time, every Friday doing that kind of sculpture session, and a lot was coming out. And each Friday I would make new stuff and have new ideas. And it's only unfortunate that I only had that one day, but the other day that I had childcare, anyways, it's all limited.
Mhm.
We have the
Mhm.
time that we have. And it just felt like it was evolving really quickly in these
Mhm.
small chunks of time. Like the pieces that I was making, the ideas were like growing really quickly and developing really
Mhm.
quickly. And so it just felt like there was so much there to unpack. And I still feel that way, which is such a rich and vibrant feeling, to really like feel like there's so much to explore. And I've really always felt that way with clay.
Mhm.
So it's cool to have this like new, because there's something like, I've always felt that way with my functional work is what I mean.
Mhm.
Endless forms that I can make, endless ways that I can alter the forms, endless ways that I could fire them, endless ways that I can mix different glazes. Like it's just never ending, that journey.
Mhm.
And so when suddenly like opening this new door into abstract work was like, whoa, oh my gosh, like this is even, there's like even more here to like explore with this
Infinite,
new.
truly infinite.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
it was really cool, and I'm kind of continuing to spend time each week developing these ideas, and it feels really good.
I love it. Well, we got to see a little bit one of your mugs that you were just sipping out of just a second ago. Do you have an example of one of
Ooh,
those pieces, or kind of to just kind of do a side by
yeah,
side of the two, maybe?
yeah, I do. So I have a bunch of pieces that I've been working on, but here's one that is kind of easy to carry to
Mm.
the screen. So I've been doing these pieces. Let me
Mhm.
go back a little bit. It's kind of interesting to show. These are entirely hand built, and I make it so that the back so they can be hung on the wall. So this will look
Mm.
something like this on the
Oh,
wall.
cool. Hmm.
And so I have 20 of these, all different shapes. Some of them look more like a waterfall. I can grab others look kind of more like mushrooms. I also have like a triptych, which is like a set of 3.
Hmm.
So this is
Oh,
kind of
beautiful.
more one
Hmm.
for just like sitting on a surface.
Hmm.
And yeah, and so I have all these different ones, and they're all in process. So none of these are fired. These are all green clay. I'm kind of still feeling like I want to create like a them before really firing them, although they're
Hmm.
all probably going to be wood fired in the end, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But yeah, like one of the major things that I've been thinking about with them is how they really feel connected to this experience of motherhood. And there's something
Hmm.
very fluid, something very watery, and something very feminine about a lot of them that like really ties in like a lot of the emotions, a lot of the sacrifice, a lot of the molding and shaping of my own identity that's happened over the course of the last 2 years.
Hmm.
And I'm pregnant now with my second baby, which I'm really excited about.
Congratulations.
And actually, this was all most of these sculptures I made like right at the beginning of my pregnancy, and I was feeling
Oh,
like,
wow.
oh, I don't feel like doing my usual stuff, and in fact, like a lot of it really felt, yeah, it felt really like relevant that I was working on it then, um and so I'm really excited about how they're going to turn out. I think a lot about about water and how water, there's a riverbed, for example, with stones and with a bank,
Mhm.
and the water has to move through, but it has to also move around everything. And that's
Mm.
what I keep thinking about with these sculptures is that it's almost like it's the shape of the water, that
Mhm.
whatever is around, whatever, the way that it needs to accommodate and flow. But then it's also this powerful force, right?
Yeah.
And it's always this crazy tug that I feel in each direction with this new identity that I have, whether it's really trying to assert my like what I need and what like the
Mhm.
time alone that I need, or the time for my work, for my art, and for my business,
Mhm.
and the needs of my family and my kid. And
Mhm.
so it's like this ebb and flow of like of the yeah, asserting your own identity, the strength that takes, and also the surrender that it takes to really care for a child. And it's really beautiful and very challenging. And so it's really cool to be like putting some of these feelings and thoughts into like a tangible form
Mhm.
that I think will resonate with other people. I kind of, I've been thinking a lot about how I want to bring like how I want to bring these to people.
Mhm. Mhm.
Saturday market, it doesn't feel like the right context. And so I've been thinking a lot more about who is my audience for this? Like, who are the
Mhm.
people that I want to show this work to. And what really strikes me, what it feels like it's calling for, is this public art realm, this idea of like bringing them to the public, like for anyone to see, for people to connect with, and maybe alongside like some of my thoughts about them, so that people can maybe relate and find what they find in them. So that's been
Yeah.
a whole new journey. Yeah.
Well, they're absolutely beautiful forms, you know, especially hearing your story behind some of the creation and the exploration that was going in there. And to be able to just imagine and dream up some of the what it's going to look like in the future. It's so cool to see it at this phase, because I think a lot of with ceramics, especially, there's so many steps towards the final product, and depending on the style of the artist and the product that's being created, you know, you only get to see this final polished beautiful piece that's created, but to see it in the process and see kind of like what that envisioning process looks like, to try and think about, okay, I've got this form, the shape is here, what do we want to do about color and texture? What do we want to do about the final kind of like presentation of it, is really exciting. And so to see it in this kind of green form, like you mentioned, is really exciting for us as audience members as well.
And it's a long process, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the ceramic process, it's long. You know, making something out of green clay, wet clay, letting it dry slowly until it's can be bisque fired, and then glazing, and then doing the final firing. It's this long process that yeah, and having like a significant, it feels important to me to have like a significant range of different surfaces and different
Mm-hmm.
examples of it, so that I can like see what I like, so that as it continues to develop and evolve, you know, I've got a lot of information from that final firing.
Yeah. Well, just looking at the forums, we have Trevor who is tuned in, and he said, "What?" So that you got somebody who's especially a big fan who's watching in tonight.
Yay. Hi, Trevor. Yeah,
Thanks for
Trevor
being
was
here, Trevor.
actually one of my students in one of my pottery classes at Mod
Oh my
Kearns,
gosh,
and
at
a
the University of Oregon?
former housemate. Yeah, no, at Mod Kearns actually.
Mount Kearns. Oh,
And he's
nice.
also a teaching artist through Lane
He
Arts Council.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of our mentors with the Design Arts Apprenticeship Program, and is just a phenomenal builder. And totally, you put any project in front of him, and that is somebody who can find the solution to them in such a creative, wonderful way. He's somebody.
Agreed.
We should probably get him on the live stream happy hour. I'm glad you're tuning in, Trevor. I'm going to reach out to him.
Yeah, he actually made me. He really likes my pottery, and I really love his woodworking. And he made me some
Mhm.
beautiful mug racks that I used for my display.
Look at this connection of
I
artists
know.
across the community. Well, I want to maybe just kind of dig a little bit deeper, and then we'll talk about your process right after this, around this idea of, you know, we've talked a bit about this, how motherhood has impacted your art. And I think that's a really exciting thing. And I think something I'm curious to get kind of some of your thoughts on. So my cousin is a professional artist also in New Jersey, and a lot of her art really explores this, ever since she's become a mother, this idea of motherhood. And especially pushing back against some of these mindsets that once, especially a very sexist mindset in the professional art world, that once women have children, they can no longer be a professional artist. Have
Hmm.
you felt that kind of experience, or any of that kind of pushback?
Yeah.
What kind of messaging would you say to people who
Oh my
might
gosh,
think,
I'm so glad you're asking that. Um, it's crazy because, you know, I think that there's the very tangible experiences of that from other people, which
Mhm,
honestly I haven't had very much of. But the way that I internalized that idea before even becoming a mother, like
mhm,
I felt like I had this stigma kind of against like the artist, the mamapreneur or whatever it is. Like there's this whole identity, right? Of once you become a mom, it's connected and infiltrates every aspect of your life. And I had a really hard time after the birth of my son,
mhm,
struggling for months and months with you know, feelings of inadequacy, feelings of lack of confidence, not only in myself as a mom, but also myself as an artist, as a business person. Like, am I even
mhm,
really a potter anymore? If this is like, if it's such a small percentage of what I do, because the reality is, the reality was, for me at least, and for everyone it's different, but you know, I really had such a limited amount of time that I could spend on my work anymore. And it felt like so precious that there was this like
Mhm.
urgency for every opportunity to really like get a lot of work done. And it
Mhm.
creates this sense of like scarcity, this feeling of
Mhm.
scarcity. And I really had a hard time kind of striking a balance. I did this amazing workshop and kind of series of workshops with Leora Sponko, who's a life coach.
Mhm.
She's an amazing coach. And I kind of ran up against a lot of what, like a lot of it kind of came out. Like, wow, I really have a stigma against people that are trying to judge, you know, people that are trying to have a career and be moms at the same time. And I really knew that I never wanted to sacrifice my career and my business as and my artwork to
Mhm.
be a full-time mom. Not that people shouldn't do that. Like I think if you want to do that, great. Like there's so
Mhm.
much fulfillment that comes from being a full-time mom, I imagine. But
Mhm.
I knew that I always wanted to keep that I had to keep my business and my artwork as a big part of what I did still because it's so important to me and it's so much of who I am. But there was still this struggle of identity and
Mhm.
like feeling like, oh, I'm not really fully committed or I'm gonna fall behind in the, you know, in the rat race of it all
Mhm.
if I'm not going like whole hog on it. And that was like just kind of letting that come out and watch it and see like what that really felt like to know that that was what I was thinking. I was like, wait, okay, it doesn't need to be that way. Like that's
Mhm.
I can really create it to be whatever I want. I can create this business to be whatever I want. And and so just like really starting to figure out how to balance like how much childcare do I really need for,
Mhm.
you know, and how much childcare do I want? Which, you know, a lot of it comes down to freaking childcare. Like that's the thing. Like, and then
Mhm.
you're paying someone, or you know, who is it? It was COVID. Like, it's COVID still. You know, do I trust?
Mhm.
Is it safe? Like, and so just making a lot of those calls and you know really a lot of last year because my husband works full time. I was the full-time childcare person, and
Mhm.
it was like I could have weekends or nighttime when he got home and I was wiped out, you know. So
Mhm.
once I kind of found a balance and was like, okay, we need 2 days a week, like I need 2 days a week where I can really focus on my work. And that was crucial. And
Mhm.
I'm really fortunate that we found like a good situation for ourselves, fortunate that we have family close by that supports that. Um, and so, yeah, that was just, you know, that was just such a big journey, finding out, like figuring out the balance. And it still is, it's always evolving. Um, but aside from that, you know, the other thing that really comes to mind is this feeling of really being in the moment, about
Mhm.
like each moment being precious. We're changing, we're aging every minute. You really see that in a baby and in a child, how time moves so quickly. And so what we do with each moment, it's like, how do you really soak that up?
Mhm.
How do you like how do you value that moment? How do you fill each moment with action that's inspired, um with like things that nourish you, with
Mhm.
people that nourish you, and experiences and work that nourishes you. And if you have the privilege to be able to make that choice, it's like, and I do, like it's just you start to see like, wow, okay, I need to shift some major things.
Mhm.
and and this feeling of urgency that I had around going from show to show, cranking out as many mugs as I could, filling the kiln in time for the next show, like just felt really like not in line anymore with
Mhm.
with that new realization. And so
Mhm.
that was where, you know, a lot of this sculptural work was starting to kind of bubble up and asking to come out. And yeah, so it just feels, and it just feels like when I look at these sculptures, I just think about like that, what I was talking about, that identity shift, that
Mhm.
surrender and that tension and
Mhm.
just, like the sacrifice and the really a lot of the like the beauties of it and the challenges of it.
Yeah. Well, I love this narrative that you've pulled out and that you've clarified for us. It's a great reminder too of the rich gifts that come from people who are experiencing motherhood, right? That
Mhm.
when we eliminate or create this narrative as a society that women once they have children can no longer participate in the art community or need to be full-time moms, which is, I mean, which many would agree is a completely outdated mindset, but still kind of perpetuates our society, perpetuates in our society, that it eliminates a whole realm of expression and this whole realm of experience that is universal. That is a significant chunk of our population have raised a child, have had a child, and that perspective is a really valuable one to make sure is included in the art created. And to see you start to explore some of these new forms, find this new realm of expression that is in response to this moment in your life and in response to this new kind of gained knowledge that's coming into your life. What a gift for all of us to be able to from. And it's a reminder of we need to support women who are having anyone parents who are having children because now many more men are being much more in a position to be participatory in that relationship with children and the household, but that we're supporting parents to be able to make sure they can still continue exploring their artistry if they want to, if they feel empowered, right? And not that there's an expectation to. It's just really, I really appreciate hearing your reflections on that and thinking about the lost expression probably has been lost for generations before us and are being lost in our generation, and some of that
Mhm.
mindset being put out there.
Yeah, so much. Yes. And how does, yeah, the way that you make work and what work you make, how is that influenced by parenthood, by being responsible for a child? Yeah, it's something, I feel like there aren't very many examples of super successful, artists that are really like exploring those ideas. And I would love to hear of if anybody has any ideas. I've listened to some podcasts of different leaders who talk about like juggling parenthood with business, with their careers and things like that. Um, but yeah, it's so interesting to see what comes out, this very specific experience of parenthood, motherhood, and like the way that your work shifts. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's just impossible for it not to, is my
Mm-hmm.
feeling.
Mm-hmm.
If especially if you're really like looking in and exploring what it is that's important to you, like it's just like such a huge drastic life experience that informs my work so much.
Yeah.
Not only like the context that my work is happening in, but even the ideas themselves that are coming out. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for anyone who's listening, if you know of any resources or podcasts or videos that you've seen that have been great kind of conversation adders to this, please put them in the comment section for everyone to kind of collectively click on if they feel so inspired. I know that there's a podcast, my cousin was featured on it, that is it's like a mom podcast, but it's specifically around artists who are also mothers, and it's professional artists talking about that duality of that role and kind of how it has shifted and how experience barriers as a result of that identity that came into their lives. So anyway, and that blessing that came into many of their lives. Well, let's jump over and shift and talk a little bit more. We've been saying that we were going to hear about this, but let's talk about your art making process. So walk us through kind of the flow from beginning to end in the studio Hummel.
Sounds good. So I have a home studio now where I do most of my work, but I'm also a member of Club Mud here in Eugene, where I do part of my process. But my process really begins with the raw clay, with throwing on the wheel most of the time, although with the exception of these sculptures, which are kind of this new direction. Um, so, making, for example, making a mug. Let's talk about this mug.
Mhm.
I'll throw first the body of the mug, which is, everything except for the handle. The next day or two, I'll trim the bottom of it and then add the handle. This is when the clay is still green. Then I let it, sit very with an even moisture in the air. So, not direct sunlight or a heater blasting on one side, and let it dry really slowly. And, I'm talking about one, but I always work in batches. So usually it'll be 20, 30, 40 mugs at a time that I'm doing. And so I let those mugs sit, dry slowly. Then I fire them in an electric kiln for the bisque, that first firing, which really dries out the clay, draws out the moisture, and leaves the pot very porous. Like it leaves a very porous surface so that it can absorb glaze. And then at that stage, it's time to glaze. I usually wax the bottoms of all of the pieces so that no glaze gets on the bottom. You don't want glaze on the bottom, otherwise it'll stick to whatever surface you're firing on.
Mm.
And then I have a combination of different ways that I fire. So in the case of, let's start with the pictures actually.
Yeah.
I do wood firing, which is a group process. We have a couple different kilns. Mostly I fired over at Pleasant Hill Pottery, and we have a bunch of different kilns that we fire there. In that case, the pots are wadded on this right side of the pot here that you see on the screen. There's a little circle kind of down. Yeah, right there. So it's on 3 wads, and that piece was fired on its side, actually. So if you can imagine that little circle that you just pointed at is on the underside of the pot, and the pot was sideways. And they're loaded into the kiln completely raw, and then they're fired over the course of 3 to 7 days with exclusively wood. So we use wood in the kiln. It takes about, for the onagama at least, which this pot was fired in, it takes a team of about 10 to 15 potters to fill the entire kiln because it's 30 feet long and you can
Oh my
stand up
gosh.
inside. So that 30 feet long and you can stand up inside, all entirely filled with pottery. And so it takes, 10 to 15 of us to fill it. And then the same group of people fires the kiln, putting wood into the kiln around the clock. Sometimes you're putting 10 big pieces of cordwood at a time into the kiln. And the ash essentially volatilizes in the kiln, settles on the pottery, and then melts once you reach a really high temperature. So this vase is a good example of that ash landing on that left side of the pot, then melting down towards, gravity, essentially towards the ground, and then crystallizing once we're cooling the kiln. And every piece comes out completely different. It's a pretty labor intensive process, and also very unpredictable. Every piece comes out completely unique. You never know how it's really going to turn out. And I love, so many things about that process, the group, the kind of community feel of it, the physical intensity of it. Something that I've really always loved is that physical aspect of being a potter. Being a potter can involve splitting wood for 3 hours, or it can involve stacking wood, or it can involve, being really relaxed and throwing on the wheel, which everybody thinks is the main thing that I do all the time, is just meditating on the wheel. But there's so many different aspects of the work. And so, I really love like the spontaneity of that process, and that vase is a good example of it.
So for vases like this, did you put glaze on this prior to is it glazed, or is this all the color is just from the wood?
Yeah, the ash, the entire, all of the color on that piece is entirely from the wood ash interacting with the raw clay. And yeah, essentially can turn
Amazing.
out this whole rainbow of colors. I mean, you could see that as a brown pot. Some people just say, "Oh, wood-fired pots are brown pots," but if you really look at that, I mean, you can see crystals, you can see green and yellow and silver and gold and red and brown and blue, and
Yeah.
you can see rivulets and you can see little speckles and there's shiny and matte areas. It's
Mhm.
just like an endlessly complex surface. And I love seeing that. And I do have an example right here of some wood-fired mugs and a vase, actually. I'll show this one too. So this is a vase that was fired standing up, and you can see these drips of ash. My camera's a
Mhm.
little bit not that great, but yeah, there's
The
a
different colors
there's
on each
a
side
there's a
that.
mug with just
Mhm.
beautiful,
Oh
beautiful
yeah.
surface. And mugs and functional work, I always line with a glaze. So the inside is
Mhm.
lined with a glaze just because that makes it easier to clean out nice and smooth because I do really care about my pieces being functional and useful.
Mhm.
So yeah. Um,
Amazing. Well, do we have one other picture that's of the wood firing process?
yeah,
Is
so
this one
that
of them?
one, yeah, that one is also a wood-fired mug, and I just kind of wanted to show that one because it's such a different surface, and that's because it's a porcelain clay body. So
Mm.
instead of that last picture, which is a higher iron clay, which turns it more that rusty brown, this is a porcelain, and the way that it responds to the firing is much more subtle, kind of more satin and gold. Um, Really, a lot of white too, kind of
Mhm.
beautiful blush. And
Mhm.
um, and so I wanted to show that one. This is also a good example of my slip trailing, which I use to
Mhm.
decorate a lot of my work. So that kind of fern pattern is a technique called slip trailing, in which I use a squeeze bottle of a very watered down clay, essentially, and I
Mhm.
trail it onto the mug when it's still leather hard, so the clay is still a little bit wet,
Mhm.
and then slowly dry, bisque, line with glaze on the inside, and then fire in the wood kiln.
Amazing. Well, how fortunate we are to have that kiln in Pleasant Hill. I imagine that's not a super common resource for many communities to have, or am I mistaken in
Oh
that?
my gosh, no, I flipped out when I moved to Eugene. I didn't even know that place existed. And then um I got I was reaching out like, oh, where can I fire my work? And I went to I just went to like look up and I talked to some different potters that I knew and they were like, you should check out Pleasant Hill. And I was like, oh my gosh, 15 minutes from me. There's 4 wood-fired kilns on one property. It's a pretty epic situation. And
Mhm.
it's Jesse Jones who lives and works there now. Um, but it was kind of originally built by Tom Rohr, who is a professor at LCC, a
Mhm.
ceramics professor. And he passed away and kind of left this legacy of a place and a whole community of people that fire together. So it's a really amazing spot, and I feel really lucky to fire there.
I love that. Well, let's move forward and check out some of your other styles that you do. So I think next we have. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's on this one?
Yeah, yeah. So this is slip trailed work again. This is fired in the gas kiln, though. This bright blue is a slip, a cobalt blue slip that I paint onto the pottery, again, when it's leather hard, and then I slip trail over it. And then this work is
Mm.
slowly dried, bisqued, and then glazed in a clear glaze and fired to cone 10 in a gas kiln. So these are the kilns over at Club Mud where I fire. And, it takes probably, I fire by myself, and there are 2 kilns there. There's a smaller kiln, which probably takes 200 pieces of pottery. And, this is a just random number because really, if you have like tiny things, like these little cups are
Mhm.
pretty small. I could probably fit like 500 of those. But like, depending on the size of the work,
Mhm.
and usually I'll use a range of big work and smaller work, depending on the size of the work. You know, it can fit more or less work. But
Yeah.
there's a smaller kiln and a bigger kiln, and I like firing both of those. It really gives a more predictable result.
Mhm.
Um, for, functional production work. And yeah, and I really enjoy a lot of the surfaces, a lot of the glazes that I've been working with. I love this bright blue, kind of indigo color, and the contrast with the white and the nice clean white inside of the cup, which you can kind of see there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's one of my glazes. And then the next slide is my Crackle work. And this is my Crackle collection. This is a glaze that I've been working with for years, kind of experimenting with and experimenting with the texture, experimenting with the color, trying to get something that I really liked. And what I really love about this is that variation in the surface. There's these big white beads kind of, and then a dark area, and it's just like kind of
Mm-hmm.
so different all around the entire surface of the piece. And the way that I get that different surface, well, first it's a layer of glazes. So the inside is a liner glaze, a white glaze, and the
Mm-hmm.
outside is first I paint on a blue slip and then dip it in a glaze that beads up that way during the firing, a white glaze that beads up that way during the firing. And then the way that I get those dark spots is by literally blowing like that
Ah,
on the clay, on the glaze while it's still wet. So you can imagine, like, if I'm holding this mug, or you can really, looking at that picture is a perfect example. That area that's kind of dark, I did a quick dip of the entire pitcher in the glaze and then immediately blew on it, scattering the glaze and revealing that darker background. So
that's
it
amazing.
has a very tactile, and on the next slide you can see it has a very like tactile, three-dimensional surface, which I
Mm-hmm.
think makes it really enjoyable to use. Also really like visually beautiful and dynamic. And yeah, so those are kind of the different surfaces that I'm working with right now, and kind of trying with these new sculptures. I'm kind of exploring what is it that I want for them. It'd be interesting to try some of these different surfaces that I already do. Maybe try a couple in the gas kiln, try a bunch in the wood fire kiln, which I think they'll really, the forms will really respond to that atmosphere really well. So we'll see
Mm-hmm.
how they evolve.
I love it. Well, this is one of my favorite things, I think, about pottery, and I think it's something too. I don't know regionally where ceramics are really big, but it seems like the Pacific Northwest has a really big ceramics culture here. I moved from Michigan, where there was pottery in their ceramics, but it wasn't really as prevalent as it is here. And we're so fortunate to have such a diversity of styles too. But this is one of the things that I really love about, especially ceramics, that you can see the fingerprints and the blow prints of the artist in the piece. There's been times that I've picked up pieces that the thumbprint is right there,
Mhm.
clay, and this feels like kind of a form of a thumbprint, that this is your breath that is literally
Mhm.
textured onto this piece. And there's something really personal in this functional piece that you could go get a picture from a store, sure, but to be able to have something like this that really has a relationship and intentionality in the way that it was crafted and created and is truly dynamic and unique is a really exciting kind of element, I think, of ceramic art.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I've always loved that direct contact with the clay, between your hands and the clay. It's like there's no medium or no separation from your material at all. And that's
Mhm.
something I've always really loved about it. And yeah, it's been interesting over the course of my education and kind of experience with ceramics to see the culture around it across different parts of the country, across different parts of the world.
Mhm.
But yeah, I did my apprenticeship in upstate New York,
Mhm.
and then did some residencies way up north in Maine, and then down in North Carolina.
Oh,
And
wow.
the Southeast has a huge history of ceramics, and then also the Midwest, actually Minnesota, there are lots of amazing potters.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, the way that different regions kind of have, and then of course the Southwest, um, there's such a rich tradition in lots of different parts of the country. And yeah, it's really cool to learn more about that. That's a whole nother conversation, and I'm not an expert on it. So
that's amazing. Well, I think you have one more style of pottery. Am I remember? Oh, that was the last one.
that style.
Well, I want to shift over and talk about one of the other elements of your, artistry that you bring to the table. And maybe this could be a little bit of a quick conversation because we are getting a little bit close on time. But you're also a teaching artist. So you're part of the Lane Arts Council teaching artists. You taught at Maud Kearns. You taught at the University of Oregon. So tell me a little bit about, first of all, what drew you to arts education and what do you get out of being a teaching artist?
Yeah. So, always at the forefront of my interest in this craft was sharing it with other people. And there's something about ceramics, where people love a handmade mug and everybody wants to make their own mug and everything. And you really learn the skill that it takes to create a beautiful and functional piece of pottery by trying it yourself. And I always felt that teaching people really taught them this appreciation of ceramics. And if it was the right person, it would, they would follow that and keep exploring it. And so that was always kind of at the forefront. And then I've always just felt that these traditional crafts, it's kind of one of those things that you could say is a dying art in some ways. We get these mass-produced dishware, mass-produced everything. And really continuing this act of creating with our hands the objects that we use every day, I see as really a radical response. Like it feels political even to me that to continue to make these things with our hands and to know our materials and to develop these skills. It's so crucial for our culture, for our species to continue this craft. And so I love teaching. I love sharing. I love sharing my love of ceramics with other people and teaching them to love it more by kind of getting their hands in clay. And just continuing these crafts that have been a part of our existence, a part of our species, for so long. I think about how, often when I'm teaching, I teach pinch pots or little functional pieces, and we talk about how, when fire, people made these sitting around the fire to hold their water or to, hold their food, and it's primitive, it's ancient, and like, how does continuing to work with our hands and slow down and learn about that process, how does that make us more connected to like who we are as human beings? And I think that there's, I've witnessed in myself and in other people too, how it can have this profound effect on your mental health, on on your sense of well-being, your sense of inspiration and creativity to work with your hands and to make things with your hands. And so often, we're stuck looking at screens like we all are right now. And it disconnects us from that really tactile human experience. And so, yeah, so I love working with Lane Arts Council. I just recently finished teaching a module on the screen, actually, because with COVID, all of our programs in schools were canceled last year. And, I was teaching, I would teach kindergarten through eighth grade, I think, and would do in-person classes with all the kids at a school. And we shifted our model, in response to the pandemic, to really continue to bring arts education to students in Lane County. And it was really fun teaching. I mean, I really missed the in-person contact with kids. It was like, if this is what we've got, let's do it. And we're going to make it awesome. And I taught this amazing module on this amazing series on making your own modeling dough, which is, yes, essentially Play-Doh, but we made it from scratch using all the raw ingredients, using food coloring, making all our own colors. And then we used those different, that modeling dough that we made from scratch to model the life cycle of a flowering plant. So we started with a seed, a pumpkin seed, and then that seed germinating and growing into a seedling, then growing into a mature plant, and then eventually flowering, being pollinated, and then fruiting, creating all the seeds for that cycle to start again. And it was so cool to just adapt, to roll with those punches of the pandemic. Like, okay, this is what we can offer them. Like, let's do it. And I thought it was really quality programming. I felt really excited about teaching it. It felt like we could incorporate all these different educational aspects, science and biology with, and even chemistry, right? Like mixing up and math, like, take 2 cups of flour, now 1 cup of salt and a tablespoon of oil to mix this up and make your own material. And, it gave kids this experience of really making their own clay and then building with it and using it to model something. And I thought that was pretty cool. They're still available online, and I'm excited to continue developing more curriculum for the art stream program.
Yeah, and we are so excited to have you back for more. For any of those who are listening who are curious about it, you can learn more about ArtStream on Lane Art's website. It's laneart.org/ArtStream. And schools can still sign up for the program. We have grant funding to be able to support rural and Title I schools across Lane County to get a highly discounted, if not fully funded, covered cost of the program to access over 130 art lessons. So Nicole being one of our teaching artists that's working on that, and a number of other teaching artists from across Lane County are participating in that. Really cool opportunity. Please check in with your teachers and see if they're utilizing them, and have them reach out to us if they have any questions. Well, I want to make sure we can fit this in because you are kind of pointing yourself. You've been exploring a lot in the past couple years around like your form and kind of what forms are you exploring. So what are some of the future directions that you're interested in kind of stretching your art making experience, and what are you feeling called to?
Yeah. So what I really feel inspired to continue doing is continuing to grow my online sales, making this a business that like really molds well with my responsibilities as a mom, and that kind of gets me more followers, more viewership, more traffic online. And I love how I can reach like anywhere in the world with that. So I want to continue doing that and continuing to expand what I make, both, with my functional work, and then this new direction of the sculpture. I feel like it's a different, it's a different beast. I feel like I want to explore more public art, more installations and places that this can go permanently or at least temporarily, so that lots of people can see it. And so I've been kind of exploring with the state of Oregon and with also the city of Eugene, different opportunities that might be there, so that as a studio artist, I can start to make that bridge into the public art realm and get some of those opportunities. It's a whole different world, really. And it's an interesting kind of, two worlds to like kind of bridge between. And I have a lot of amazing contacts that I've been making that we'll see where it goes.
Amazing. Well, we have a question that did come in. Well, 2 questions that came in. First of all, Carrie Hummel is curious, can she buy that vase that we were looking at earlier? I think one.
Sure, Mom.
Well, it sounds like anyone who's interested, they can purchase your art through your website, right? NicoleHummel.com.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, NicoleHummel.com.
And then we had actually somebody who has been peeking around on Nicole on your website, and Pia was curious about the blue and yellow brightly colored vase on your website. I'm not sure if that pops into your brain of which one that might be. She mentioned Was curious if there was anything that you wanted to share or add about it.
Gosh, it sounds like it's probably a wood-fired one. But I guess I'll need to look into that. Pia, if you want to message me, we can talk about it.
Huzzah!
Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, reach out to Nicole. You've got her website. You're already on her website, so check out the contact portion. Nicole, this has been such a wonderful and rich and beautiful conversation. I have one final question for you. Where are you finding inspiration right now?
Mm. Oh, the first thing that comes to mind is the flowers and the sun and this little life that's growing inside of me. Yeah, I've really just been trying to like slow down, and I'm finding a lot of inspiration in self-care right now, in
Mm-hmm.
slowing down, getting away from the grind, and doing just like nourishing things, being outside. Um, yeah, that's what's like really feeding me right now. And especially with the change of the seasons, it feels really nice to be just slowing down, gardening, enjoying walks and hikes. So
Amazing. The
yeah.
whole world cracks open right now.
Yeah, it
Well,
really does.
Nicole, congratulations again on the journey into motherhood and kind of the ways that your art has been ebbing and flowing and evolving through that process. And congratulations also on the future baby that is growing inside of you. Congratulations to your whole
Thank
family.
you.
Such an exciting and big love time in your family right now. So congratulations to all of us. Um,
Thank you,
and thank
Eric, and
you.
thanks for taking the time to do this with me. It's really an exciting opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. We so appreciate you. And thank you all of you who tuned in tonight for the happy hour. We will be back next week and we will be featuring Traylon Day, who is a promoter in our community. So he really helps artists be able to find their audiences and get connected with them. So we'll get to learn a little bit more on that side of the artistry spectrum. Learn a little bit about, especially a number of the BIPOC artists, the Black, Indigenous, person of color artists that he is really trying to help promote in our community. So please tune in again next week. We'll be back at 5:30 next week, but just look out for the event on our Facebook and page. And we'll be streaming onto YouTube from here on out. So if you have anybody who is interested in being able to catch this but isn't on Facebook, please direct them over to our Lane Arts Council YouTube page, and you will see videos be posted usually on Mondays for the Wednesday live stream. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Nicole. This has been a wonderful
Thank
conversation.
you.
See you all next week. Bye.
Bye.